Hello. Welcome everybody on this very warm day to this very exciting and very timely discussion. This is the latest lunchtime panel where we're talking about how we might build greater mutual understanding between education and the creative and cultural sectors to better support realistic expectations of the world of work. Absolutely loads to unpack in that sentence already. So as you'll know, today's event is hosted by Creative and Cultural Skills. They are the sector skills body for the cultural industries with a focus on connecting, guiding and representing colleagues from education as well as creative and cultural organisations to create a fair and skilled sector. So CC Skills is currently developing its offer, and this conversation is one of the tools that colleagues will be using to assess need in the sector. So those colleagues are here online, they're listening to everything you say and taking it down. It will all be extremely useful to them. So thank you for being a part of that process. My name is Lizzie Crump. I am a freelancer working in the sector. I've had lots of different hats over the last 20 years. I've worked for Arts Council England, I've worked for the government, I've worked for a local authority, I've worked for a think tank. I, for the last 12 years, was the co-director of the Cultural Learning Alliance, which is an organisation which aims to ensure high quality arts and culture for every child and young person. So I am delighted to be here today. We are all audio describing ourselves, so just to let you know that I'm sitting in my lounge with my signature very large bird wing earrings on and my glasses, and in front of a board where my 5-year-old son has been doodling monsters this morning before he went to school. We're delighted that so many of you are joining us today. Before we get properly started, I just want to kick off with a few small housekeeping things. So colleagues will recognise that this session is being recorded. It'll be circulated to everybody who signed up to the session and will be put on YouTube. We're also providing captions. So you should see at the bottom of your Zoom screen a clear button to press to enable those captions and access them. We have sign language interpreters, which you should see on your screen, who are part of that recording as well. As we go through the session today, if there's anything that you find troubling or you want to talk about, or you have any safeguarding needs at all, just drop a quick line to communications@ccskills.org.uk and colleagues there will get back to you to have a further chat on any of that. And similarly, as we go through, if you're experiencing any accessibility issues or anything comes up during the event where you can't see or you can't engage with the session, do use that email address, communications@ccskills.org.uk, and colleagues will sort that out. We will be taking questions throughout the discussion, so please feel free to pop these in the Q&A box as we go, and we'll aim to answer as many as we possibly can. Any that we don't get through will be picked up by the team on social media, so do look there afterwards as the conversation will continue. So just a quick note from me that this panel is being held at a really interesting and important time for the creative industries. So just yesterday, the government announced a new creative industry sector vision, where the Prime Minister announced an ambition to grow the creative industries by an extra £50 billion a year, while creating 1 million extra jobs by 2030. And that's on top of the sort of admission and the case that's put forward in that document that the industry is worth £108 billion a year. So the vision document includes £70 million of new investment into the sector, as well as a series of pledges on careers, mentions of a national plan for cultural education, which will be delivered before the end of this year, and lots that hopefully will have resonance and will be there as a backdrop for this conversation. Colleagues across the UK are still digesting and analysing the vision and thinking through what it might mean for them. But this session really gives us a great opportunity to think about some of the issues we'd like that vision to tackle, practice we'd like to see expanded and built on, and change that we'd like to make. So it feels like a really important and vital time. So now onto our panel, who will be introducing themselves. There's a fantastic range of experience that colleagues are bringing to this discussion today. And I'd like to pass over first to Christine to introduce yourself.
Hi there, my name's Christine. I'm in the northeast of Scotland. I'm a music instructor in a very busy high school. I do apologise if you can hear any drums and trumpets and things in the background. I'm just doing this in my lunchtime. I'm also in the community a choir lead. I'm an MD for a musical theatre group, primarily with children or young adults. I'm a community musician, and I have had experience working with learning disabilities in a project, music and drama project. Yeah, I'm sitting in a classroom, I've got my pink lanyard on, and I'm ready to enjoy the discussion.
Thank you so much, Christine. Melissa, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa. My pronouns are she and her. I am a petite Chinese woman in my mid-30s with shoulder-length hair and glasses, and I'm sitting in front of a very anonymous white wall, meaning I could be anywhere in the world, but really I'm dialing in from my home in South London. I am Director of Programs at Arts Emergency, and we work across London and nationally, especially in Manchester and Merseyside, to provide mentoring and support for young people from underrepresented backgrounds looking to break into the creative and cultural industries. And my role is providing leadership and direction for all of our programs. My background has been mainly working with children, young people, and early career artists with organizations like Arts Council England, Help Musicians, Sherwood Arts, on everything ranging from cultural education policy to best practice for inclusive employment. And this just really brings together a lot of my interests. I'm really looking forward to this discussion today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melissa. Jane, can I pass to you?
Thank you, Lizzie. So I'm Jane Harris. I have a title which is a bit daunting, Professor Jane Harris. I don't consider myself to be an academic. I'd say I'm more of an entrepreneurial academic, and I'm very much coming from a practitioner, creative practitioner background. My origin was in textiles, working in the context of the Crafts Council until the late 80s, when I actually took on the mantle of looking at virtual reality and the potential of craft and aesthetics in that context. And I have to say that's been a 30-year journey from then until now, and we're still at the beginning of that journey. My professional role is Director of Research and Innovation, Stratford. So I'm involved as part of University of the Arts London's development of a new estate in a new cultural village community as part of the Olympic Park, and that as part of the Olympic legacy. And UAL's new estate through London College of Fashion will be opening up with 6,500 students in one building in September of this year, with our neighbours, the V&A, BBC, Sadler's Wells Hip Hop Academy, Wayne McGregor, and with partners already there, University College London, Loughborough University, Queen Mary University, and many, many others. It's an incredibly exciting project, which is really just at the very beginning. So this is a very pertinent discussion.
Thank you so much. And last but definitely not least, Joanna.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Joanna Slater, and I'm Curriculum Manager for Creative Culture and Visitor Economy. And if you can decide what that means, then please let me know. But of course, it encompasses all of the arts. My background is both educational and from a freelance perspective, where I am a practicing live sound and lighting engineer, alongside the day job of looking after creative arts here at the college. That's as well as you're lecturing in those subjects as well. Really looking forward to kind of taking part in the discussion today, because I think how we can bridge that gap between education and, you know, the industry moving forward, I think is particularly poignant at the moment, you know, given the news that we've received yesterday, today, but also being out there in the industry, knowing that we're absolutely desperate for technical staff as well. So I'm really looking forward to being able to engage today. Just to add some context to where I am in my crazy creative arts and music office, which has got its usual level of crazy in the background. I have an orangey yellow lanyard and slightly crazy red hair.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, all of you, and extra welcome to you all. So I thought we would kick off the discussion today with each of our panelists giving us some thoughts on what are the key strategies that you use to prepare your students for the world of work? I know all of you have different contexts and do it slightly differently, and it would be really great to hear from you. So Joanna, actually, I thought I might come to you first, just for 2 minutes on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. We actually deliver the University of Arts London awarding body qualifications. So it's really nice, to see Jane here in the room as well. And what I would say, in terms of preparing learners for the world of work in the creative industries, it's about having the right awarding body from a curriculum perspective. I think we can probably all agree that there's a number of constraints with different awarding bodies in terms of what can and can't be delivered, what particular skills they think are appropriate and relevant. But what we found was when we moved awarding body maybe about 6 or 7 years ago now across to UAL, was that they provided us with the flexibility and autonomy to work with the industry. They already consult with the industry in terms of their specifications, which is again, of course, very, very helpful. But it enabled us to create real life briefs with employers. So when we are assessing and teaching learners, we know that that is coming from the skills that the employers are asking for. And we know that because we've written the assignment brief with them. So if something changes in the industry today, we will be adding it into the curriculum tomorrow. But I think what's also critical to that is your staff base. And if you can surround yourself, we're in an FE situation, which makes it a little easier, but if you can surround yourself with a staff base and a team, which I'm very fortunate to be able to do, there are still majority practitioners in the industry as well. That helps to create those meaningful links, to maintain those links, and perhaps make them a little bit more accessible. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it really does. That's so helpful. Thank you so much. Melissa, can I pass to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So from Arts Emergency's perspective, the best way to prepare young people for the world of work is giving them access to working people and working experiences. We started out as a mentoring charity, and that's still our core offer. We provide a mentoring year for young people aged 16 to 18, thinking about next steps as they move beyond compulsory education and thinking about their future career paths. And we pair them with an individual who's working in their area of interest. Maybe they already have an idea of what part of the sector they'd like to go into or what type of role. Or if they don't yet, then we try to pair someone with their general interests. And that mentor will spend a year working with the young person to help them understand their unique strengths, help them to flesh out their interests, learn about different types of roles and career paths that are aligned with their strengths and interests. And also practically, like thinking about what next steps they would need to take to get into their first roles. We pair young people with mentors in their geographic area, someone who really understands how the industry works in their area and who has the networks and connections to help them to get that first break. And where possible, because we work with a lot of young people from underrepresented backgrounds and who are experiencing additional challenges to accessing careers in the creative industries, we pair them with people who share similar personal backgrounds as well. So it might be that their race or ethnicity, it might be that they share a disability, or it might be that they even went to the same school or from the same specific geographic area. And I think what this really centers on is the importance of individualized support and seeing the young person for who they are, and the importance of having that one-to-one connection where a young person can gain knowledge and skills and networks from somebody who is actually working in industry. And that can help young people to really feel seen, to discover more about themselves, and to learn more about the possibilities for what work can be and what it could look like for them. So beyond the mentoring year, once they have an understanding of what those next steps might be, that's not enough in itself, just because they've made decisions about what next steps they might want to do beyond schooling. We also give them experience of work firsthand. So we organize shadowing opportunities, work experience, and paid work opportunities. And those are things that are really quite challenging for a young person to get if they don't already have networks and connections in the industry. So we move from this closed network idea to helping our network to offer out opportunities to young people who don't have those connections, making access into the industry transparent and giving them those sort of initial first steps so that they can start to build their resume, build their skills, and ultimately take further steps for themselves.
Thank you so much. Jane, can I pass to you?
Absolutely. So in my day-to-day job, I'm often working with doctoral training students. So that PhD MPhil space, which sounds a bit Hogwarts and inaccessible, but it's absolutely not. It's just simply a different form of education. It often looks challenging because it's lengthy, but actually that length of study is really useful for organizations often to explore, particularly in the creative industries, to explore research and development. So obviously we don't have quite the same volume of students in that space. They come from all walks of life. They might be coming out of industry, back into education and wanting to explore a more hybrid method of learning research skills, often through the delivery of R&D with businesses, with SMEs, often developing transdisciplinary, so cross-disciplinary, working with design, STEM and anthropology approaches to delivering, you know, maybe quite complex or challenging projects that even industry struggle with because they don't quite know who to recruit or how to recruit to address certain things, and particularly currently around artificial intelligence and sustainability. And that's very simply because there are just so few people across the UK, and I think in general, because of obviously the rapid developments that are taking place in broadly these areas, and in particular, you know, fashion and textiles and screen. So increasingly, we're finding that there's great opportunity for research students to be involved in the delivery of R&D as part of their research study, which then benefits SMEs. But what's important about that is that that also drops down into other aspects of our provision. So obviously being doctoral students, they're often involved in teaching. So to some extent, they then become an interface with industry and students at every level, which is really fantastic because it's not always easy to bring the industry partner in the room. They've got to keep their businesses going. You know, so realistically, whilst you might like to have brands in the room a lot, which obviously students do, they love that. They love to be connected to the world that they think they're going to be working with. It makes sense, but that's practically not always possible or reasonable. So doctoral students and MPhil students are able to do that at a particular level, which is great, but they're also able to go into schools education and further education, and to some extent through the research and development projects that we've been developing, be that interface to illustrate what's possible in industry and what different types of conversation through different types of education are possible, and also to demystify what PhD is. You do not need to speak Latin or have 40 O levels and A levels to do research study. It's just a different type of study. And I would also concur with Jessica that, you know, many who work in the creative organisation, the likes of where we do, University of the Arts London, is that a huge number of our staff cohort, whether they're working at the front line of technical or academic delivery, have their own practices. So they're very involved in the industry that they're helping to bring students and connect students to at every level. And I do not separate out technical from academic. I think that increasingly it's very evident, and I think UK research and innovation are also seeing this, that the value in both skill sets working together is extremely high, and that traditionally would have been perceived to be sort of hierarchical positions, so that the technicals kind of serve the academics, but that actually is not the case currently. And so there's tremendous skill across that cohort. I don't agree with the fees position. Maybe that's not an appropriate thing to say, but I have to say, if you were looking at good value education, the creative education that we offer, you know, it's pretty much 365 days of the year, access to studios, access to people, access to skills, access to lectures, etc., and access to industry. I mean, it is an extraordinarily good value education, although oddly, it's often perceived to be the thing that's slightly terrifying, where the jobs out the other end going to be. So that, I hope that helps give a little bit of an illustration of what I'm specifically involved in, but also to embellish a little bit on what Jessica's outlined.
Yes, that's very helpful. I just want to say to colleagues, there's a couple of acronyms in our sector that pop up all over the place. So just for my clarity, SME.
Small to medium enterprise, which can actually be quite a large concern, you know, so you might have several thousand employees, but technically you're operating within quite a constrained brief.
Lovely. And STEM?
Science, technology, oh gosh, help me.
Engineering. I think engineering and maths.
Engineering and maths. Thank you. That was a bit on the spot.
That bracket. No, not at all.
I take arts out of it. I mean, STEAM has become, I take arts out of that because actually I think that where the real marriage works in the context of where we are is the design, STEM, anthropology piece. So it's humanities as well. It's understanding the human first and the human at center of whatever it is that we're designing in whatever creative or technical way. And I think that's a very different thing to STEAM and the perception of STEAM being arts. Sorry, I'm going to be clear about that.
No, that's really helpful. I just want to also say research and development for R&D for colleagues, but that's really, really helpful, Jane. Thank you. I'm just going to move over to Christine now for 2 minutes from you on your strategies.
Yes, well, mine's a lot more simple. I'm reaching children in high school age, so 12 to 18. They're doing courses with the SQA. They do Nat 5, they do higher, they do advanced higher in 6th year. And 50 to 60% of those courses are practical musicianship because it's music I'm specific to. And the rest is the concepts of music. But to be quite honest, I don't find it relative to the world of work. The curriculum is not relative to the world of work. Our curriculum is not in Scotland, isn't, unless you're going on to be an educator, unless you're going on to education yourself, then it feeds in nicely to that, but it doesn't really. There are a few alternative awards that we do, NPAs, which are National Progression Awards. They're under the SQA, so they're more streamlined to performance and the running of a concert, so more music business, music industry related, but they come as if you're not able to do a higher or an advanced higher academically, that's your offering to stay in the music department, rightly or wrongly. So I think there should be more of that available because we don't really feed into the world of work, in my opinion. Yeah, that's mine.
That's really, really interesting. Thank you all for those perspectives. I'm just thinking through sort of what you've all said and sort of heard about the need for curriculum sort of at all stages of education, right through to the higher education and the work that Jane's talking about, for that curriculum to be flexible enough to include routes through to business. But a couple of colleagues have mentioned sort of the rapid rate of change in the sector and in industry and what a job in the creative industries might mean. We've seen, huge precarity over the last several years with COVID hitting, with cost of living, with, huge changes to the way that we work and fluctuations in that workforce. So we know in some areas we have, exactly as you sort of mentioned, Joanna, we have a real need for technical college. We have real shortages of skills in the creative industries of people coming into those jobs. And in others, we have a huge oversupply with, people not being able to find a route into that career. So I just wondered whether any colleagues want to talk about how they future-proof for your students in that area. How do you think about that change and fluctuation and try and ensure that what you're giving students is what they need in that space?
I'm happy to start it on this one again, if that's okay. I think from our perspective, it's also about kind of widening participation and understanding of what a creative role might be. I think, we've talked before about the viewpoint around creative sector and creative jobs, and I know that there's also a lot of kind of analysis done from curriculum perspective about positive destinations and whether it's linked to your programme of study and things like that. And I think what's incredibly important is for the wider community to understand that a creative role doesn't have to be in a traditional creative job or what we would depict as a creative job. So, for example, we do some work with, or have done some work in the past with Jaguar Land Rover and their apprenticeships and bits and pieces like that. The folks that are designing their cars are from an art background. Their audio technicians that supply their stereo systems are from a music technology background. And I think, and that's just two examples. And I think sometimes we forget, not we personally, but the wider we forget that actually judging the success of a learner or a young person going out into the world of work has to be from something we can notably say is a creative business or banded as such. And I think that's often a little bit of a misconception in that regard as well. And so for me, it's about enabling our learners to understand that there is a wider world out there. And sometimes the route into employment might be through a slightly alternative progression method, maybe through a slightly different organisational company where perhaps you might not consider it to be in its initial stages creative, however it is. And I think one of my favourite kind of quotes that I like to use in our curriculum planning process, where we have to justify our curriculum by saying how many jobs there are out there for a particular programme, is that there's a creative person at the heart of every successful business. And I truly believe that. And so I think making sure the learners get that message is particularly important. But in terms of keeping current and up to date, it is about consulting those large employers, small employers, individual employers and freelancers. What is out there? What do they need? Where are they seeing that the skill shortage is? And also, I think not compartmentalising students if or young people when they're looking to go into industry, about saying you are going to work in art and design, you are going to work in performing arts. It's about looking at the fact that those transferable skills are actually very, very necessary. And a recent conversation with stage manager for Glastonbury confirmed that coming out of COVID, 30% of the technical staff didn't return. And actually, they'd gone into being system engineers elsewhere or working in computerized businesses somewhere else, but utilising those creative skills and system design skills that they got from the creative industry. So I think there's a little bit of a shift sometimes needed there as well.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Jane, did you want to come in?
I think, absolutely, what you've just heard is the case. I think, creativity isn't just a thing that you acquire in order to change the color of something. It is a way of being. And so if I think about our graduates, our students, yes, they'll have a show, a fashion show or a graphics show or whatever. But what we've mostly done, and importantly, I think this is the most vital thing, particularly for parents to understand, is equip them with the agility to troubleshoot and understand and address really difficult challenges in the world challenges. It's not just about, I think there's a propensity to think that metaphorically sitting in your bedroom making something is this internalizing negative small thing, when in fact actually what you're often doing in that process, and I'm saying this as a practitioner, is solving something else, often 20 other things through that process. It is a way of engaging cognitively that's hugely underestimated and provides you with problem-solving skills that are easily, as you've just heard it, are easily transferable. I also think that unfortunately we have, we're only just, I think, beginning to touch the tip of the iceberg of unsiloing perception of particular disciplines. So I studied textiles originally. I went into virtual reality in the early days when there were only 4 computers in Scotland and, not that many more in the rest of the country. And you had universities departments fighting over who was going to most warrant the access to that computer. That was fascinating at the time to see where that positioning took place in the late 80s. And of course, look at how ubiquitous that tool has come. But then there's the propensity to think that, education needs to become purely mathematics to tackle the potential. Absolutely, the opposite is necessary. And also, to understand that just in the textile space alone, we've been delivering this multidisciplinary creative cluster program, which has been feeding into the news that you announced yesterday about the current understanding now of the value of the creative industries, where I've had to constantly explain that the textiles and fashion space actually encompasses everything from agriculture to advertising, with virtual reality, augmented reality, XR, all of those disciplines in the space between. And if you train somebody up to work in textiles, you are training them to tackle over 3 years. I mean, I do mean literally hundreds of different disciplines, languages that also help them cognitively to engage, just as I have. I work with students in biosciences, biosynthetics, materials engineering, AI and machine learning, computer sciences, as well as obviously all the creative disciplines, screen, live and recorded performance, film, games. That flexibility comes from the creative core of the learning opportunities that I've had in life. And I don't come from a particularly creative family, a complete anomaly, as many of us are, black sheep, finding my way, many, many difficult educational experiences, many good ones in further education, I would say, which is hugely underestimated as a connecting point to both industry and different forms of education at all times in life. So it's creativity is a tool, and it's an enabling cognitive level of engagement. That value for money is probably one of the most agile you can have. I hear so many graduates come from other disciplines, theoretical disciplines, that get completely stuck and don't know what to do because all they've done is read information and perform in examinations, and not necessarily have practical application opportunities of that form of study that they've paid a great deal for. So I go back to what I said earlier. I think creative education is actually incredibly good value for money, but it's not one I would, I don't align to the fees system.
Thank you, Jane. Christine.
Yes, sorry, just adding on to what Jane has just said, the message is not coming through to schools that the creative industry is a network that's threads through all walks of life and parts of working life. And also the misconception that we have is that there's no money in a job involved in the creative sector, and that's, I'm dealing with parents here who won't push their children in their art, even, no matter how big the talent, because they feel it's not a proper job, and we still have that way of thinking. So the message needs to get into the schools about the broader opportunities for work and the agility that the skills will bring when you're moving through your working life. So yeah, I feel that's a strong point to make.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Christine. I just wanted to pick up, we were having a quick chat prior to this, prior to the webinar, where we were talking about the impact of your sort of environment and setting on building those understandings around work, and also those partnerships with industry, and the role that freelancers might take with that. And I just wondered whether you might want to say a little bit more about it.
Yes, I mean, I'm in northeast Scotland between Inverness and Aberdeen. So our opportunity for further education is, over an hour away, at least, sometimes maybe 2 for any further education, but also to have employers come into school. These bigger industries, we've got a lot of sole traders around where we are, just with the local heritage, and but there's no financial gain for them to come into school and share their working practice with the students. So that could be looked into. That could be, if there was some kind of financial benefit to them, that might be something that we could look at. But to get the sort of bigger employers to come from out of their city areas and come to the rural areas is a big problem. And then also getting the children, the students over to these employers, obviously logistically is a problem also, just because of our rural area.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. Melissa, passing to you.
Thanks, Lizzie. Just to quickly pick up on that, I completely appreciate the challenges around getting employers to come to you if you're in a rural area. But it is worth mentioning that, especially since the pandemic, there's just been a huge growth in the number of remote opportunities available. And I know that's not the same thing as being able to meet with somebody in person or being able to go into a workplace in person. But I can certainly speak from Arts Emergency's point of view, where we've done a lot of online mentoring. So pairing young people with a mentor who isn't necessarily in the same geographic area as them, but has the expertise to help guide them through remotely via Zoom or via Google Chat. Or we provide work shadowing opportunities and work experience opportunities where they can do a day of shadowing or a week of work experience fully remotely, and they can, many workplaces are working in more flexible ways these days. And certainly speaking for my own organization, a lot of our meetings are online because we have staff across the country. So that's definitely worth looking into, is remote opportunities to connect with employers. I also just briefly wanted to go back to your earlier question, Lizzie. You were talking about oversupply in some parts of the sector and undersupply in other parts of the sector. And I think that this is hugely related to the way that we teach young people about what types of roles are available in the sector. So much of creative and cultural education is focused on the doing of the thing, playing the instrument, making the art. And I think that's a wonderful and beautiful thing. But I think it leaves people with a lot of misconceptions around what work actually is. And I think people tend to think of work in the creative industries as what they see on stage or on screen or the familiar household names, but there are so many roles available. My first role was grant making for music education, and then I've done research and evaluation. And those are things that I had no idea even existed when I was making decisions about what to do with my career, and not to speak of all the other roles like fundraising, finance, general administration, stage management, and technical roles. So I think it's just really important that there are more opportunities for young people to connect with those who are working in industry so that they can see the range of roles that are available and that they can find the one that meets their interests and their skills and, give them a sustainable career.
Thank you, Melissa. I really want to pull out some more of that. We've got a couple of questions in the chat that are specifically looking at these ideas that we've been talking about around perception of value of careers in the creative industries. But that's information, advice and guidance that goes to young people at all stages when they're making those decisions about which route to choose and how. John McMahon's got a question that says, how effective do you think that is at the moment for our creative industries, and how might it be improved? Joanna, can I come to you first on that?
Yes, certainly. I don't know if I'm going to be politically giving the right answer here, if I can be honest with you. However, I don't think there is effective advice and guidance out there about the roles in the creative industries at all. I think, it's fantastic that our colleague Christine here has got such an active engagement creative industries kind of department within their school. But I think what we're seeing certainly a lot in England, certainly from an education perspective, is that the creative arts is actually declining in schools. They're not doing creative subjects in schools. They're being taken away from the curriculum, not everywhere, but in a lot of places. And I think that that's also having an impact on the advice and guidance. We here at the college have a good advice and guidance team. And we have to obviously adhere to the Gatsby benchmarks and advice and guidance and things like that. But even within our organisation at times, if you ask a student what they'd like to do for a career and they say that they'd like to have something to do with performing arts or they'd like to have something to do with art, they go to a website and they bring up jobs in the creative industries and it simply states artist, musician, performer. And all of those wider jobs that are out there that we've kind of alluded to and talked to about all of the artificial intelligence, the design stages, Jane was talking about obviously development and textile development things as well. They're not mentioned anywhere. And I really do think that schools and colleges have really got some way to go in terms of their advice and guidance in regards to the creative industries. And I think, again, stems from that perception. And ignorance, if I'm honest. And I don't believe it's intentional, but I think there's a definite ignorance around that, which again, I think it's, if we can get those learners through our door that want to work in the creative industries, it is falling to us as curriculum team, which in part rightfully it should, but to ensure that we are fully exposing them to all of those opportunities and all of those kind of different aspects that are available to them. And actually that's something that CC Skills really, really heavily helps to do, you know, with the resources that CC Skills have set up, but also the opportunities that they offer with the discovery days, with the, you know, the festival days and all of those things as well. So I think with schools and certainly the early part of FE, we really do need some kind of reform and understanding of the roles that are available in the creative industries.
Thanks, Joanna. Christine, you were nodding along there. Do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I totally agree with you. I think that there is there's a question there about, specifically for me actually, about the careers advice that the children are given in school. There are careers advisors here, and they are very good generally for the local area, but they don't offer, there's nothing to offer the children any sort of dipping their toes in different walks of life. There's nothing to offer them, you know, that they can read it in a book. Oh, you could do this, or you could do that. A sound production technician, you could work with a festival, you could, that kind of thing. But without actually going and having that hands-on experience or talking to people that are doing that role, it's just a flippant idea. So yes, it is definitely down to the senior leadership team, the careers advisors. I mean, I'm a music instructor, and I have a lot of community-led groups, and I take a lot of the students out of school into my community-led groups. I have a few every year who end up going to study music and then possibly do community music, which is brilliant, but it's just one or two. I think there needs to be more people like me coming into school and actively talking about the world of work and where it's led them, because obviously a lot of you have started off doing something very, you know, simple in the arts, and it's taken you down a completely different path. And yeah, so I think there needs to be more opportunity for that in school.
Thank you, Christine. Jane, you've got your hand up.
I think I welcome the government position yesterday. That's the first in my 30 years in this business at many, many different levels, I would say, although it does echo a not dissimilar political period 10, 15, 20 years ago. But we do have to recognise at this point, as with many things in our world, that, you know, may seem more important. And there's a huge well-being piece, I think, to think about in relation to this in addition, but that we've had nearly a 15-year gap in terms of the level of provision that you need in schools. And if you don't work from bottom up, then the challenge you have with some of the questions that we can see coming through this discussion are going to be very challenging, because there just aren't enough people to do the jobs that we need to do, not just the delivery of all that the creative industries are seeking at every level, but even the careers advice, because to be honest, it's quite difficult to give careers advice. I mean, I was told my only destiny was really as a hairdresser, forget any further education. That was going to be a complete disaster, waste of time, you know, and I didn't come into education in the role that I'm in to be an academic. I came in because of the skills that I can acquire and the access points that this particular type of provision in arts education and creative education gives you. So the range and scope and the ability to intersect so many different disciplines was just increasingly attractive as I was able to find ways of doing that. But, you know, as I said, there have been many, many years of very challenging moments, particularly in the 80s, a rather parallel time to now, where creatives had very tough times financially, but actually had the most to say and were therefore considered to be incredibly creative and had fantastic ideas, and often did find ways of doing stuff which was really radical and boundary pushing in this country. So I somewhat knock the current position because it does require investment. The government's going to have to get its shoulder behind the statements that it made yesterday from the bottom up. That's imperative. And it really doesn't cost a lot. It's about really putting a little bit of money where your mouth is and an enablement. We can all do this, and we can do it really, really rapidly if we want to do it. But that's a step, I feel, that has yet to be taken. Having knocked the UK a little bit, if you go to any other country in the world, what we do in the UK is phenomenal. And actually, there are many access points. We forget about, all the festivals, everything from Edinburgh festivals to design weeks to, not least we've got 300 universities, nearly all of them have arts courses. At this time of year, you've got arts degree shows. These are all open source access points. And I think it wouldn't take a great deal to network that information, even as a simple form of informing schools as to what is free for young people to go to with parents, with teachers. It's not about going to museums it's about seeing real stuff in action. So it's quite different to other higher education opportunities where, they tend to be very exam driven. There's physical stuff produced. There have been moments during the pandemic where universities have thought, great, we can do all of this online. So there's also online access, although there's nothing beats physical stuff. I've just been to the Central St. Martin's degree show, and the buzz, with I don't know how many thousand students graduating, jewellery, ceramics, material futures, biosynthetic, design futures, film, graphics, TV. I mean, it's phenomenal to see that. I'm very lucky. I'm in London, but it happens all across the country, all across our nations. And I think we just, careers advice, yes, that's challenging, but there are actually very accessible points to learn more that we don't flag up often enough. So that a register of that activity probably wouldn't take a great deal to pull together and help schools see that there are ways of helping young people look at what it might be about, and we don't probably really do that as well as we could do at this point.
That's really helpful. Can I just build on that? Because we've got a question in the chat, which I'm just going to read out, which is, what do you think are the challenges for creating a more diverse creative industries that enables young people from socially and economically disadvantaged backgrounds to become professionals, especially when creative subjects are being reduced in public schools for a STEM-focused science, technology, engineering, maths, to remember, approach to education? And I think it's really worth thinking that through, of how we talk about some of those huge structural inequities, even to access some of that freely available activity and engagement that you've just outlined there. And Melissa, I know that you had your hand up to talk to the last question, but just being aware of the time we've got together, I wonder whether you might be interested in contributing to this.
Yeah, absolutely, because this is just so closely related to the work that we do at Arts Emergency. When you look at the statistics around who is working in the creative and cultural industries and who is able to advance and progress in the industries, it is heavily biased towards people from higher socioeconomic backgrounds. So if you're from a lower socioeconomic background, and this is often linked to wider issues as well, such as race, ethnicity, gender, disability, if you have multiple barriers that are preventing you from accessing careers in the creative industry because of who you know, or rather who you don't know, then it's going to be very challenging for you. There's also this bigger issue around what does it mean to actually work in the creative industries? And I think that there are lots of stereotypes out there around how precarious it is, how poorly paid it is, challenging work environments. And I would say that's not always true. There are some beautiful and wonderful places that I've worked where I felt incredibly well supported and cared for. But the reality is that there are many roles out there where you are going to have lots of challenges if you don't have a strong safety net to fall back on. So I think there's a huge onus on the sector to be thinking about the structures that are in place within our own industries and our own organizations, and how we need to fix those structures in order to make it an attractive and a safe place for a young person from an underrepresented background or a lower socioeconomic background to work.
Thank you. And anyone else from the panel want to sort of pick up on what some of the changes to those structures could and should be? Jane.
I mean, it is a challenge, and it's a cultural challenge. I mean, I was talking to a lady on the bus yesterday on the way into Elephant and Castle, and we were talking about, again, another University of the Arts London estate, which is about to be pulled down and replaced in that part of the world. the diversity issue, the inclusion issue, and on so many levels it is quite challenging. But actually, I do think that in the context of the creative sector, again, it's certainly not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but the mindfulness that we are building around that in this country, I would suggest, is unprecedented. I'm certainly not saying it's perfect, but I am saying that the considerations towards it are far greater than I've ever seen in my time, for what it's worth. That also, it does present challenges in many different contexts that we could cite, and that's probably a whole other discussion. But I would say it's also an opportunity for communities to engage. However, there is obviously, following my conversation with the lady on the bus yesterday, a real disconnect across our different communities and cultures in this country. And I think we're seeing that politically currently. I think it's also why you would advocate for across our education system, the rationale for strengthening, the integration of experience, and our experience economy across the UK, which is why the creative industries have now deemed to be so important, because of that 100-odd billion that the experience economy effectively encompasses, is actually much more inclusive than I think we realise, and particularly the pandemic has shown that. Through particularly digital experiences. So I think we're just beginning to learn about the communities and audiences that we do connect to. There's a huge amount more to do, but I do believe we've got the tools to do that. I mean, again, I've got the privilege of being in London. We're moving into a new estate in Stratford in the Olympic Park. We've already spent 10 years working with schools, further education, etc., in order to ensure that we don't just land like a rocket on the moon as part of a regeneration project that doesn't care. We want our project to include the communities that we're moving to live with, and for those communities to feel that our door is open to them. So our new building will have an open access, public space, as will the V&A, as will Sadler's Wells, etc. And we're even thinking, about the level and type of curriculum offer. So, we're a university, but we have, over nearly 2,000 short courses with lots of different access points, many of them online and not very expensive. And I do mean a few pounds, not thousands of pounds, that we're using as our tools to embrace a broader, more inclusive community. And not just because it's a nice thing to do. I really want to be clear, for example, AI machine learning, it is not going to work unless we're all involved in the development of those tools. It just isn't. We are going to have huge problems unless we operate in a more inclusive way, just in a more pertinent level. But in every sense, that's where I think creative education is a real leveler in some respects. It breaks barriers down. That's why you have British councils working internationally to use as a soft power. We call it a soft power, which sounds quite weak, but it's a very compelling power to bring communities together. And we can do that across, we can bring creative education in STEM, vice versa. I use the example of CERN, the Hadron Collider. We bring creatives into the physics world through projects out in Europe, for example. It's just a little bit less visible than it ought to be. But yes, that inclusive education piece is imperative. We've got to keep building those blocks.
Thank you, Jane. Now, we're coming to the end of our session, even though I fear we could go on for hours. I could definitely go on for hours with this discussion. There's a lot to include and a lot more I'd like to pick up on. But we've got about 7 minutes, and I just want to go around our panel just as a sort of reflection to ask, what one thing do you think we need to do now to better support those realistic expectations of work in our creative and cultural sector? What's the one action? If you were writing the plan to go under that new vision, what's the one action that you would really like to see included within that? Joanna, can I go to you?
You can. I think for me, the one action really is about making sure that we can provide young people, learners, people interested in the sector with those links to help them achieve and succeed. And that's kind of linked to, I can see there's a couple of questions actually in the chat that we've not quite got to, but talking about how accountable creative education should be. And actually, we do have a responsibility for this, because it is how we are measured, it is how we are funded. Therefore, we've got to do something. And we've got an awful lot of people out there that are incredibly passionate about what they want to do. And certainly where I am in the demographic of Wolverhampton, we have a lot of people from, those backgrounds that perhaps are less advantaged than others. And I think if they can get the right education, which has the right links and support to help them see that this is achievable and attainable, then I think we do have that responsibility to make sure that we're building into that into our curriculum with whatever links we've got and whatever links we can find.
Great, Joanna, thank you. Christine, to you.
Yeah, I second what Joanna says. Obviously, I'm in a different position. I'm quite remote. Although in saying that, my demographic is quite, it's an area of poverty too. So we have a mix really, but just having more links with the creative industry in school would help, just generally would help open up some eyes, change attitudes, and get rid of some misconceptions. And I think that's quite important going forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Christine. Melissa, to you.
Thanks, Lizzie. I would say that the one thing that we need to do is just to build better connections between education and industry, recognizing that each of us can't do it on our own, but we need to build that bridge so that young people feel supported as they transition beyond education into their careers. And also, not just that they're given access to information and advice, but that they have genuine encouragement and support to develop their interests and create the lives that they want to have for themselves and have the confidence to do it. And I would just add as well that we want to give young people realistic expectations of work, but we also want to empower them to challenge those conditions and to fight for something better and not just be satisfied with the world as it is now.
Wonderful, thank you. And Jane, to you.
So it won't be any surprise. I mean, obviously, investment in education at every level, but particularly in schools, there's so much that you can do that's really very little in terms of cost. And that immediately provides an inclusive space for everybody to learn how it is creativity can help them in lots of different ways, even if they don't choose not to do a career or develop a career in this particular context. It gives them the different types of tools, as we talked about earlier, that will help them in all kinds of contexts. And maybe later on in life, they'll come back to those tools, you know, perhaps pre or post-retirement or at a different education level. Education attainment is, I know it sounds really corny, a lifelong journey. I mean, that's the whole point of it. It's there for us always, all the time. I think it's increasingly helping us through very difficult well-being scenarios. And so, that's really important that we recognize that. So that investment early on is not a lot of money. And I think also to recognize that, being involved in the creative sector is often quite a slow journey, not a fast journey. And that's a good thing because it makes it sustainable and it makes it something that we can keep coming back to because it is often more accessible than we realize when we know more about where to access it. So yes, just joining those dots and really funding from the grassroots up.
Thank you so much. So just for a small sum up from me, some of the things that I've heard over this very densely packed hour are, our need to ensure that we think about arts, culture and creativity across our schooling and our education system and that we invest in that. A need to ensure that we have a curriculum and qualifications that are flexible enough to be co-designed with industry and with practitioners that really have an understanding of what it means to be part of that workforce and which are flexible enough to adapt to the rapidly changing nature of that world of work. We've talked a bit about the fact that the playing field is not equitable. We've talked about the fact that there are barriers across that piece to young people, and actually there are sort of huge things that we can all do to change the way that those young people are able to access those opportunities to engage, whether they're about finding out about opportunities, whether they're about finding opportunities to become part of the workforce, whether they're about, exactly as Melissa said, about meeting people who have the understanding of moving through the system in the way that they have. We've talked a bit about careers, the fact that the perception of the jobs in creative industries is often a real barrier for young people and their families, and that the information, advice and guidance that we put forward in the career support within schools and institutions is absolutely critical to breaking down some of those barriers and giving a realistic expectation. We've talked about change, we've talked about AI, we've talked about technology, we've talked about the fact that we need to have a multidisciplinary approach when we think about creativity. So we're talking about it in the range of different sort of industry and job roles that could involve it, but also the different ways that creativity affects the way that we're going to be thinking about building a new society. And I want to finish on Melissa's point, which is about that empowering of young people to be building the future and making that change that we all need to see. What do we need to give them that they can sort of go forth and make the world that they need? Tiny moment as I'm at 1:30 indeed to thank everybody so much for all their extraordinary contribution today, and particularly to CC Skills for hosting and bringing this panel together. It will all be picked up on social media, all the questions that we haven't managed to get to in this hour, and colleagues will be in touch with sort of the next stage and the next conversation. But have a wonderful afternoon. We're really, really grateful for your time. Take good care.